Good afternoon, everybody. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 99 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. Pursuant to a request by 4 members of the committee under Standing Order 1064, the committee is meeting today to discuss the pressing affordability challenges facing Canadians and Canadian businesses. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I will now open the floor to the members who have submitted the request for this meeting.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Chambers.
Would it be appropriate to, at this time, to motivate the motion before the committee that was sent in advance?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, colleagues, for agreeing to meet with us, and I appreciate the resources provided by the House on a Friday afternoon in the summer when the House is not sitting. Obviously, inflation and affordability is the number one issue. We did provide the notice of motion in advance for the benefit of members, but for those of you who may not be regular committee members or who have not been sent that from the clerk yet, it's a one-sentence motion, which I would like to read into the record, that the Standing Committee of Finance call the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance to appear before the committee by herself for 3 hours, and that the Minister appear at committee within 7 days of the adoption of this motion. Now, we've debated many motions requesting the minister's attendance in the past. We are, at least I'm open to some reasonable amendments that would see the minister appear, but we need to have some comfort that the minister would appear. Inflation and affordability is the number one issue across the country. The impact it's having on Canadians is drastic. Rents have doubled over the last 8 years. Mortgages are up about 137%. When people are renewing mortgages, which is happening every month for the last 6 months, they've seen incredible increases in monthly mortgage payments. These are not tax deductible. That is money that is after-tax money that needs to be found for people to pay additional mortgage costs. The CMHC says we need about 3.5 million homes by 2030, but we're on track to have the lowest and fewest housing starts since about the 1970s. Just recently, OSFI is concerned about rising insolvencies, both for consumers and businesses. And I would point out that just before the 2008 financial crisis in the United States, mortgage delinquencies and defaults were tracking very, very normally for the months just leading up to the financial crisis. And then immediately they jumped overnight. So just because we might be at a historical low level for mortgage defaults does not mean there's an incredible growing risk. And I'm concerned that we are not paying as close enough attention to what is happening in the mortgage market. And finally, with respect to inflation, yes, inflation, the rate of inflation has dropped, but all that means is that the prices are not going up as fast as they were. The primary reason for inflation dropping, according to the Bank of Canada, is falling energy prices. That has nothing to do with government policy. In fact, the government is trying its very hardest and is determined to make energy more expensive, with the carbon tax going up every April, and then the new carbon tax 2, the clean fuel regulations going up every July 1st. And then just yesterday, the Minister of Environment announced new electricity regulations, which will increase the cost of energy. So if the number one reason for inflation dropping is energy, and the government is actively trying to make energy more expensive, that is completely counteracting the work that the Bank of Canada is doing. Now, there is some confusion at the committee around previous motions inviting the minister to attend and whether the minister has actually satisfied those invitations. The motion that was passed in November by this committee, which was the will of this committee, and we heard very much about the will of this committee, was that the minister appear for 90 minutes on a quarterly basis until inflation came back to the in the control range, which is 1 to 3%. The Bank of Canada governor was also invited. He appeared twice as in respect of or in answering that invitation. The minister did not appear. And frankly, what's the most important is that these invitations were supposed to be in addition, and this is in from that motion. These meetings and appearances are in addition to other key committee appearances, and that this meeting start in 2023. The only time the Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister has appeared before this committee are to advance pieces of her government's legislative agenda. That is not acceptable when we have had, on at least multiple occasions, the minister being invited to appear. The minister was also invited to appear with respect to the inflation study. That has not occurred yet. That study is still open. We're still awaiting the minister to accept that invitation. So the reason why we're here, colleagues, is to increase the level of accountability that we have with the government, find out what they are planning. Energy prices are very volatile. They might think the job is done. They're doing a bit of a victory lap, that inflation's back down within the control range, but it could much easily tick up. And I'm very concerned about what's going to happen in the fall when people continue to renew mortgages every month at a much, much higher interest rate. You know, the minister tweeted just a couple days ago that we are focused on making life more affordable by bringing inflation down. That's a very interesting comment to make. The government wanted no credit for inflation happening in the first place, but wants to take all of the glory for inflation coming down. Other than the HST rebate, doubling of the rebate for 1 year, which they renamed the grocery rebate, the government actually has not taken any steps to bring inflation down. And by the way, the grocery rebate is a step that helps Canadians with the affordability crisis. It had actually nothing to do with bringing inflation down, but just helping people give them a little bit more extra funds to support themselves to deal with inflation, but it didn't actually do anything to bring inflation down. So I'd be very interested to hear from the minister what steps the government has actually taken to bring inflation down in the short term. Now, they might have done some things in the longer term, but certainly there's been nothing that they've done to help bring inflation down. And by the way, this is a government that also says that the Bank of Canada has complete independence with respect to monetary policy. So very interested to hear the thoughts of my colleagues around the table, of course, those from the government and other opposition parties. I impress upon the minister to accept the invitation if it is so the will of the committee, and also make one more last-ditch request for the Prime Minister's office to allow the Minister of Finance to appear and defend the government's economic record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Mr. Saint-Marie, I see your hand up.
Oui, alors merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. We are here today to discuss the statistics published by the bankruptcy superintendent regarding the data for this June, and we see the increase in bankruptcies, both among consumers and businesses. This is very concerning. It's a situation that may lead to a domino effect. And things may get worse over the next few months. When we look at the economic situation, we will be getting more numbers at the end of the month. In my opinion, this is an emergency, and we need to know what the government intends to do. This week, in Quebec, we learned that Juliette et Chocolat franchises will be closing. This crepe store was a staple in our province, and yet, considering the economic situation, the owner decided to close the restaurant. We see this kind of thing increasingly happening. Mortgages are harder to pay, and there are more and more personal bankruptcies as well. This is a matter of great importance, and we want to know what the government is going to do. So I think the solution is to invite the Minister of Finance to tell us what is being done, what the action plan is, and how things can be improved. Which is why I believe that it is key that we invite the Minister to hear how she is reacting and responding to the current crisis.
Thank you, Mr. Saint-Marie. Mr. Blakey?
Thank you very much. So I guess I'll start by recognizing, as others have around the table, the importance of the issue. And I think it is quite disconcerting to see insolvencies on the rise. And we know that that these numbers represent a state of affairs that that existed prior to a number of subsequent rate hikes by the Bank of Canada. And so this is certainly something of concern. It's something that the committee has looked at in various other ways as well. We've talked to folks from banks, particularly around fixed payment variable term mortgages. You can ask what's going on there. As the committee knows, whether it's talking about inflation or whether it's talking about interest rate increases, I do think that the minister ought to come. I think she has a sufficient number of invitations to be able to come if she so chooses. So I'm not exactly sure why this particular motion is the one that's going to put us over the top, particularly in light of the fact that I think this motion retains a lot of problematic and unhelpful elements that have been the subject of a lot of discussion around this committee table before, whether it's the length of the invitation, the idea that she should appear without her officials, or in this case, a relatively tight turnaround for the appearance. And so, as I say, I don't think this is a particularly helpful motion in the way that it's construed. I don't think it's likely to get the minister before us. I do think it would be good to have the minister come quickly to committee at the opening of session in order to address some of these issues. There has been some change in terms of, and Mr. Chambers referenced this, the inflation rate since we last met. I think it would be useful to discuss those things. I am determined to be optimistic about getting the minister here in the context of our inflation study so that we might close it off. But I think that is the best way for her to appear. And so I don't think this particular proposal really fits the bill, if I'm being honest. And I think there's a lot of context on the record for why I feel that way. So I won't belabor those points any further, but wanted to make it known that while I do support the minister coming here, as I have for a long time now, to talk about the issues of inflation and interest rates, I think there are better ways to do it than what's been presented here today.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. I have Ms. Zerowitz next.
I think I thought my colleague Yvonne was up first.
Sure. Sure.
So if I'll let Yvonne go for, I'm sorry, I thought he was, and then I don't mind going after him.
Sure. Mr. Baker.
Thanks very much, Julie. I appreciate that. So let me start by saying that the underlying issue that's referenced in the request to meet today is incredibly important to my constituents and to Canadians. I think we all agree on that. I think that, I could have more to say about, I have a lot to say about this issue and some of the things that Mr. Chambers in particular spoke to at the beginning on the underlying subject matter of inflation, the cost of living, and what's being done about it. But I think what I would really rather just focus on is how we move forward. I think we've been working throughout the summer to hear from Canadians and to listen to their ideas as on a range of topics, but also on how to improve this committee and the functioning of this committee. And I think we've all agreed. That there have been moments of dysfunction at this committee in the recent past. And I think what I recall is that we ended our spring sitting of the committee with the objective of reworking, rethinking, working together on how our committee works going forward to make sure it is more productive and better serving Canadians on important issues. So here today, we're in an emergency meeting with an invitation for the minister to speak to us within a week. And so I think this motion is unreasonable. I think Mr. Blakey, I agree with a number of the points that Mr. Blakey made about why it's unreasonable. And, you know, and I really think that the focus of this committee should be one where we're all working together to try to discuss the issues that are most important to our constituents and to Canadians. So I do think the motion is unreasonable. And I think one of the things we could be focusing on concretely as a committee to advance the concerns of Canadians and the issues that are important to Canadians is on the pre-budget consultations, which are coming up and which I know we're the committee's planning for. So to me, that would be the next immediate thing that I think we could do to try to advance the concerns that Canadians have. But like I said, I do think that that what's been proposed by this motion, having the minister come in within 7 days to speak to us, I think in a number of other aspects of the motion are unreasonable.
Thank you, Mr. Bicker. Mrs. Zervitz.
Okie dokie. I just thought, I think that there's a proposal on the table, Mr. Chair, just for a few amendments to what has been proposed by Mr. Chambers. And so I don't know whether, there are no amendments that are being proposed. Okay, so I am going to just talk for a couple of minutes. Look, first, I think it's always good to do a point-in-time check. Mr. Chambers had put forward a very important motion. I think that all of us have been meeting with thousands of our colleagues, not colleagues of our constituents over the summer, and we have been blessed to be able to hear firsthand from them. And I have also heard very much that my constituents in my riding of Davenport are struggling. I'll say that to Mr. Chambers, there is nobody on our side of the bench. And I would say to you, there's no one in our government. It doesn't matter what political stripe who's actually doing any type of victory lap. The pandemic and its aftermath, I think has caused a major ripple within sort of all global economies. And I think that it's going to take some time for us to find our way out of it. But I can go on, but I just want to let Canadians or anybody that's listening know that we as a government has not been sitting idle. We have introduced a number of measures to help support Canadians through this really tough time and try to find the balance between making sure we're providing targeted support, but not in any way trying to spend so much as to fuel inflation. And so whether it is the grocery rebate or the increase in the Canada Child Benefit, whether it is the Canada Worker Benefit, whether it's the dental benefit, and various other things that we have put into place. We've put in a number of measures. We have not been idle. We will not be idle. We will continue to be listening to Canadians. We will continue to be open to all the best ideas from any political party, from any person, in terms of how to continue to help address the affordability issue that continues to make so many Canadians suffer. I'll also say to you that, I read international newspapers, I'm sure we all do, and I know, and unfortunately we're in good company. Most of our peer countries around the world are tackling the same issues. And as much as we have it bad, and I know we are struggling, we are among the lowest in terms of inflation numbers around the world. And so I think it's always important for us to understand that there is a collective struggle around the world in terms of dealing with affordability issues. And I don't want anybody who's listening to not know that we are not thinking about this every day, that we're not wanting to work on this every day, and that we're not open to every single idea that someone might want to put on the table, and how do we continue to support Canadians through this really difficult process. So what I'd like to propose, Mr. Chair, is can we vote on the motion that is at hand? I think Mr. Chambers has done a good job of putting forward a motion, and I'm ready to vote on it.
Thank you, Ms. Zerowitz. We have a list going, and once that's exhausted, then definitely we can get straight to the vote. Next, I have Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and it's a pleasure to be here, and always an honor and a privilege to serve the Canadian people. I think it's fair to say, and I think everyone around the table has pretty much agreed, that we're dealing with some very challenging economic times. The uptick or increase in bankruptcies, the numbers perhaps don't really tell the whole story, because when a business goes bankrupt or an individual goes bankrupt, it has real impacts on Canadians. That's potentially a parent that has to sell their home or have their house foreclosed on. That's a child, as we get up to Thanksgiving and Christmas, that won't have presents, that may not have enough to eat. These are serious consequences. And this government has just undergone a cabinet shuffle, and it appears as though by media reports and even internal leaks that they're looking at a different direction. And given the difficult economic times that we are headed into, I think the Minister of Finance owes it to the Canadian people to tell them what direction are they going into. But, you know, I heard Mr. Baker's comments with respect to the dysfunction of this committee. I agree. I also heard some of Mr. Blakey's comments with respect to some changes he might be looking for into amending this motion, and to maybe making it a little less partisan. And I'm open to that, and I think he's right. He's been consistent in the record in calling for the Minister of Finance to come here, and perhaps we could change some of the parameters. And I would leave it up to him to make the amendments, because I think he's obviously best to speak for him and for the NDP party than I would be. But I would think it would be, and I don't use this word lightly, irresponsible for this committee not to have the Minister of Finance before us, given the fact that we have an uptake in bankruptcies and insolvencies, that we've continued issues in the housing market. We have recently even troubling international data that maybe some of the countries around the world, some of the advanced economies around the world, are also going to be having some struggles as well. And so that, in the background of the new direction that this Liberal government has, it appears as though might be embarking on, I think that she owes it to the Canadian people to come before the people's representative, before the committee selected to discuss the finance, that being the Finance Committee, and discuss it with us. And so I'm very open to an amendment from the NDP with respect to the parameters on if he believes that there might be a better way to request the minister to kindly come before our committee and talk about what actions her government is going to take to counteract these very difficult economic times we're having. Because I don't want to be partisan, but I mean, the record is clear. We are, over the last 10 years, we've had the lowest economic growth per capita ever in Canadian history, or since the Great Depression, I should say. And I think she needs to come and explain that she's learned perhaps some of her lessons, and then maybe she'll be taking a new direction. Or if she wants to double down, then she should tell the Canadian public that as well. And like I said, I know that my NDP colleague, Mr. Blakey, has been absolutely consistent in calling for the Minister of Finance, and I trust that he'll keep his track record of calling the Minister of Finance, and we are very open to changing. So I would yield the floor with hopes that Mr. Blakey will take it, but please do put me back on the list, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. I don't see anyone else's hand up. I see Mr. Blakey. Mr. Blakey?
Sure. I mean, I just offer, Mr. Chair, that there have been a lot of attempts around this table over the past couple of years to try and fix motions on the fly that have come to naught for various reasons. So I can't say as I'm particularly inclined or that I think I have a successful solution for today. I'm open to continuing a dialogue with my colleagues on the opposition bench about how we invite the minister in order to try and get her here to talk about these things. I do think that in the context of the inflation study, which has been open now for, I want to say, going on a year and a half, a little over a year and a half, it would be nice to have the minister appear so that we could wrap up that study and start on some other things as well. So I'm open to a discussion about that, but I'm not hopeful that this is something we're going to solve on the floor of the committee here today.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Just wanted to double check. I thought I saw Mr. Chambers' hand up.
Yes, Mr. Chair, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, colleagues, if we are going to go to a vote, I think that's fine. Eventually, we will get there. If the minister will continue to not wish to appear at committee until or only when there's legislation to move, we will continue to have some challenges at the committee. I did not hear any of my fellow colleagues from the government side indicate that there's a willingness for the minister to come, that she's interested in appearing on, to close out the inflation study, that she's interested in appearing to make up for the two appearances that she did not attend with respect to the previous motion that was passed. So, unless we get some kind of assurances that the minister is taking the committee and its work seriously, if the minister would love to come and tell us, what she's interested in the committee studying that would make her job easier, we have opportunities to, put more studies forward. I think there's a very good study to be considering for with respect to housing and mortgages. We're in the mortgage one right now, but in terms of how we will meet our housing requirements, if the minister wants to give us some direction or steers on what she's interested in advance of the next budget, that would also be helpful. But in the absence of kind of any government member indicating that the minister takes the committee seriously or is interested in attending, whether it's for 3 hours or 90 minutes or even an hour, it's going to be very hard for us to get any work done. And frankly, it was the will of this committee that asked her to appear for 90 minutes with the Bank of Canada governor, which was never even responded to. And so if that's going to be the continuation of the committee, look, we'll live with the results of a vote today. But if that's going to be the continuation of the kind of thought process of the minister and the prime minister's office, then we will have a challenging fall. We will have a challenging spring, and we could be back to the lectures from Mr. Perkins, which were all very interesting, but we weren't very productive as a committee last year. So this isn't an attempt to put something on the table. If the minister is interested in taking it, or the government's interested in taking it, or making some amendments, that's fantastic. I mean, this is a government and the minister, frankly, who is cheering that we are now down below 3% for inflation. You know what? Some will look at that and say that's great news. And other people will look at that and say, guess what? My groceries are still up by 9%. There is a discussion to be had there. The minister just recently said in a news conference that we are close to the end of the very difficult time. Except 3 weeks later, OSFI says that insolvencies are up for consumers and businesses. So I would actually like to know which data is the finance minister looking at, because they think everything's fine, as they've been saying all along, then Canadians have a right to know what the minister and the government is thinking about in advance of the next budget. And if we can't get the minister to appear and to have a discussion with us, then it's going to be a little difficult to get anything done in the fall. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. I have Mr. Lawrence next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do recognize my colleague's comments, Mr. Balicki's comments, but I am an eternal optimist, and I still hold out some belief that the Minister of Finance will uphold her obligations, I would say, to the Canadian public and appear in front of this committee. And at the very least, if she won't do the right thing, then perhaps maybe she'll feel the heat for not responding. So I would offer in that spirit, offer the following amendment to Mr. Chambers' motion, and I'll read the revised version, and then maybe if the clerk need be, I can go through and clarify any revisions, and then we will circulate the amendment as well. Okay. Let me just, 1 second here, my apologies. Okay. That the Standing Committee on Finance call the Deputy Prime Minister, should say, and Minister of Finance to appear before the committee will delete by herself for 90 minutes, and that the minister appear at the committee within 14 days of the adoption of this motion. So once again, that the Standing Committee on Finance call the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance to appear before the committee for 90 minutes, and that the minister appear at the committee within 14 days of the adoption of this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. I guess while are we going to be drafting up the amendment at all and sending it around?
I can circulate.
What we can do in the meantime is open up to debate on the amendment. Yeah, Mr. Baker?
Could I request a suspension just so we have a chance to consider what Mr. Lawrence is?
Sure. And in the meantime, we can the clerks can probably send that around to everybody. Okay? We'll suspend. Do I hit the gavel? I'll call the meeting back to order. So everyone should have received the amendment in their inboxes by now. Thank you, clerks, for getting that out to everyone. Ms. Zerwitz, you had your hand up before the amendment was called. I just wanted to ask, do you want to talk on the amendment at all?
Sorry about that. I could talk on both of them. I could talk to anything, Mr. Chair.
Sure. So we're on the amendment. We're on the amendment. So we'll open the floor to debate on the amendment. Go ahead, Ms. Zerwitz.
Okay, thank you so much. And you say my last name very well, Mr. Chair, so thank you. Look, I'm just going to repeat because I do see a couple of other colleagues after me. And I would have stopped talking just for the record if we were going to go for a vote. But I do see Mr. Ridicop and Mr. Chambers who would like to speak as well. I just want to reiterate to everyone around the table, there's no victory lap that is happening on this side of the bench. And again, as I said, I don't think there's one member of parliament, doesn't matter what political stripe, that doesn't understand how difficult these times are right now. And I think there was a question that Mr. Chambers was making to say, you know, whether the government will want to be held accountable. And I think what I had wanted to say is we have shown that we want to be always accountable. Our Deputy Prime Minister has been before our committee. I believe it's been 5 times now. And I think that she will absolutely be coming before the committee a number of other times in the coming, whether it's days or weeks or months, as is appropriate. And the other thing I was going to indicate is that I felt that Mr. Blakey had made a very good suggestion. He said that we don't do very well in terms of at committee with discussing amendments. And if we felt we needed some more time to actually discuss this offline and come to an agreement outside of this meeting, I think that that is also an option. So I think with that, I'll just pass the floor along. I always have more to say, but again, I think we're all trying to look for some sort of a resolution. But I will say to you, there is nobody that doesn't think on this side of the bench that Canadians are not struggling. And I want to reiterate, we have done a number of measures we've put into place to try to alleviate some of the stress, to try to provide some additional dollars, put them into the pockets of Canadians, to provide some relief, to provide some support. And we're always open to the best ideas that are out there. And I think that should always be the case, that we should always get together as many times as possible to be discussing the best ideas about what more we can do to support Canadians. Okay, so with that, Mr. Chair, I will take down my hand and pass the baton to the next speaker.
Thank you, Ms. Zerwitz. I have Mr. Chambers up next.
Mr. Chair, just as a matter of procedure, I would accept the amendments as friendly, so just to make it cleaner. If that makes it easier for the committee. So it's just one vote up or down on the 90 minutes. And would just add, not really sure what else we would need to discuss. It's either the minister is interested in appearing before the committee outside of a regular appearance with respect to legislation or not. Thank you.
So we do still have a speaking list for now before we get to any vote for the amendment. So next I have Mr. Redekop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, everybody knows I'm not a regular member of this committee, and I thought it's kind of interesting. What I'm hearing from everybody is they want to work together. They want to see the minister appear. They want to all work together for the benefit of Canadians. Everybody's on the same page on that. Yet it's interesting that there doesn't seem to be the will to do that. So I would just hope that the committee would actually begin, the talk about functioning better as a committee. This is the place to start, from what I can see. And of course, as I said, I'm new to this committee as an outsider, so it seems like this is a pretty simple motion. The amendments, I think, are reasonable, and I just think it would be a good way to start the year, the new fall session, with some good progress on that. I think it's very reasonable for the minister to appear to this committee as well. And I just want to also mention that in my city of Saskatoon, people are struggling, as has been mentioned before.
I have many people with modest incomes that live in my riding, and speaking with, one particular woman, a single mom that I can think of that I was talking to in the summer, she can't buy meat for her family, and so she's feeding her children cereal. And that's not a single story. I've heard that kind of thing many times. And our food bank usage in Saskatoon is up 35%, and 18% of the users, according to the CEO, are working people, and 43% of the users are children. And so this is a big issue that's affecting all of us, regardless of party, regardless of where you are in the country. So I would just really put my pitch in to have the minister appear to talk about some of these things and to see, what are the plans of the government to solve this problem, to fix things for the benefit of Canadians. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Redekop. I don't see anyone else on the speaking list. Mr. Baker, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. So I just wanted to say on the issue, we're speaking to the amendments.
Yes,
correct?
on the amendment.
I think I appreciate the effort made to make these changes. I think I still think the motion as amended is still not reasonable, and I don't know that it sort of helps to advance sort of a more productive approach to covering these issues, whether it's cost of living or anything else at committee. I do think that, the committee's time is, when I think about some of the priorities before us, I think about pre-budget consultations, I think about where we can hear from folks about how they believe government, all of us as MPs, can address cost of living and other issues that are important to people. There's other things that members of the committee may want to study, but I do think that is, the path forward on this, rather than sort of an emergency, a sudden emergency call for the minister to appear, especially given that the minister did appear near the end of our last session, and so that's my position on that.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Next, I see Mr. Blake with your hand up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I suppose I find myself in a position pleasing nobody on the committee, perhaps. So I would say this, it still strikes me that even with the amendment, this is a motion that's designed to fail. I think, one of the ongoing frustrations at this committee, and rightly so, has been that the minister has been invited to appear on very many things and hasn't appeared on anything but her own legislation. That's the crux of the matter. And there's been a lot of issues that go beyond the scope of the minister's legislation that this committee has wanted to examine and has wanted to interview the minister in respect of, both to glean more insight into the government's approach to these matters, and also to appropriately challenge the government on the response to a number of things. I mean, that is the job, after all, of the parliamentary committee. But I think when you have a long-standing issue running up, at least a year and a half now, of a minister not responding to invitations, to say whether it's 7 days or 14 days turnaround, that we're realistically expecting her to suddenly change her longstanding position of snubbing committee invitations, I just don't think is very realistic. So, when we're coming back into session, I think that's a more likely timetable. I don't know that all of the minister's time, I don't know what time the minister has spoken for or not, but presumably she plans to be in Ottawa around the time of the opening of session. I think that's something that, would speak to the committee preparing its work for the fall in a way that the amendment doesn't do. And I would say, but I guess I'm just I share the exasperation of other opposition members with the minister not being willing to come and talk about inflation and interest rates, except in the context of her own legislation. But I have to ask, I'm not. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and over again. So this play of trying to issue new invitations to the minister hasn't been effective. And what could be effective is for the committee to spend even half the time that we've spent over the last 2 years talking about ministerial invitations, talking about the issues that we all say we want to talk to the minister about, and talking to other people in Canadian society who are experts, whether those are economists or whether those are advocates or whatever, in the housing space, in the grocery space. As Mr. Redekop mentioned, more and more the folks who are running food banks around Canada are becoming experts on the economy. and really have their finger on the pulse of what's going on and what's wrong with the current state of affairs, those are people that are also worth hearing about. And so, or hearing from, I should say. And so, you know, the minister can come anytime she wants. I think that's pretty clear. The issue isn't whether the committee's issued enough invitations. The issue is whether the minister is going to come. And I think our time would be better used. You know, if we want to issue another invitation for when we come back in the fall, well, fine. But I don't think that's what's going to break the logjam here. What I think we could do is, instead of waiting on the minister and spending all of our meetings talking about when the minister is going to come, when I think a lot of us already know the answer to that after a year and a half of waiting, we should be talking to other folks who have that expertise so that we can be issuing reports back to the House that talk about what the government should be doing, its shortcomings. You know, I'm sure there's many of us that would like to point out some of those shortcomings. I'm sure there are others on the committee who would like to point out areas where they feel the government has done a bang-up job. So that's the meat of the work of a committee. And I'm just, after spending, you know, two years pretty much on this committee, I'm concerned that we haven't been doing enough of that work. We've been waiting for a minister who isn't coming except when it's her legislation. And I think it's time that we start building, you know, what I'm hearing from opposition members is that they want to put pressure on the government to act otherwise. I think it's time for us to be coming up with some real recommendations as a committee for what government ought to be doing that it's not, or things that it is doing that it shouldn't be doing. And that's another legitimate way of building political pressure and holding a government to account. I think spending more time talking about the length of time a minister is going to appear, or setting deadlines we know are not going to get met, like a 14-day turnaround on an invitation when there's been invitations open for 18 months that she hasn't taken us up on, or as Mr. Chambers pointed out, in some cases hasn't even responded to in the affirmative or the negative, I think is just not the best use of our time.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Next, I have Mrs. Zerwitz on up next.
Mr. Chair, I think you said Mrs. Zerwitz, and I'm
Yes,
not
sorry.
married, so you can call me Ms., but that's okay. Just call me Ms. Anyways, look, I think, you know, just speaking to the motion, and I'll reiterate this again, I do believe our government very much believes in accountability. Our Deputy Prime Minister very much has come before this committee 5 times, actually, since we were last elected. And just to refresh everybody's memory, December 9th, 2021, on C2, she came for 2 hours and 20 minutes. May 2nd, 2022, an hour and 10 minutes on Bill C-19. October 3rd, 2022, an hour on Bill C-30. November 28th, on BC 32, an hour, and then May 16, an hour and 30 minutes on Bill C-47. I'll also indicate to you, just to put this on record, Mr. Chair, that between 2006 and 2015, when the Conservatives were in the big boss seat, the finance minister came 15 times in 10 years. So I would say, and only maximum, by the way, for 1 hour each and every single time. So I just want to put that on the record in case people need to have a little bit of extra history. Look, where I'm going to agree with Mr. Blakey is on 2 things. One, I had already mentioned before. I think that we can reach, I think it's been hard for our committee to reach a decision on the different amendments when we're in committee and in session. I think we could take this offline and come to an agreement on what is it that we need to be doing moving forward. There's been different ideas put forward, whether it's we start moving right into pre-budget consultations and start tapping into some of the really excellent ideas that I think Canadians have in terms of addressing whether it's the cost of living issues that we have right now, or whether we start looking at how is it that we can create a more resilient, prosperous Canadian economy moving forward. Or, you know, as Mr. Blakey had suggested, we continue with the inflation study, which is something that is very front and center and top of minds for all Canadians right now. And I think I'm open to all of those options. I also do not believe that if we have the Minister of Finance, our Deputy Prime Minister come before us, that we are going to be resolving all the issues. I would rather be hearing from a number of people in terms of what are some of the creative things that are actually happening in the world. I would rather be hearing about what is it that we could be doing to actually increase productivity, increase growth here in our nation. I think there's a lot of excellent ideas that actually don't cost money. Some of it's been mentioned already, whether it is tackling our interprovincial trade barriers, reducing regulations. A lot of our businesses, whether you're small, medium, or large, are saying there's far too many regulations and red tape. Maybe we could focus on eliminating some of those. We could accelerate some of this, or I'm not sure if we could look at the supply chain issues, but I know that there's some of the issues around that. But I think that there are a number of ideas that we could be looking at that would actually improve the internal economy within Canada, that would actually make Canada more efficient. We could look at a little bit more closely as to why our business investment has been so low and why productivity has been low. And it's been mentioned by my Conservative colleagues that that's been the case. But, you know, it's been the case for a lot longer than just the last 8 years. It's been the case for 20, 30 years that we've had very low productivity rates. And many have suggested that it has to do with our competition policy. And maybe that's something that we need to look at. And I think just, you know, in terms of Canadians struggling, and believe me, every day you cannot stop but be moved by how difficult the current economic climate, the current cost of living, and the impact that it's having on our constituents, on our Canadians. I think we're all moved by it. I think we're all troubled by it. We're starting to see some of the data, as I believe my colleague, Monsieur Samary, had mentioned in terms of the bankruptcy rates. And that's why, for me, it was really important for me to indicate it's awful. It's also important for us to remind ourselves, though, what happened in terms of the economic impact of the pandemic literally has been unheard of. And the reason I mention that is that it's taking a long time for not only Canada to recover, but I would say for the global economy to recover as well. And so it's important for us to understand that. And maybe I'll just, you know, I don't know what you guys do during the summer, but other than meet constituents, I also do a little bit of, you know, I do a lot of reading. And, you know, I was reading Adam Tooze, who's a Columbia University historian. He said within the first 6 months of the pandemic, 95% of the world's economy suffered a simultaneous contradiction. That has never happened before. 3 billion adults were furloughed from their jobs, and they had to work from home. That had never happened before. More than 1.5 billion young people had their schooling interrupted, and the sum of lost earnings in just the first 6 months of the pandemic was $10 trillion US dollars, more than a tenth of the global GDP. And why do I say that, you guys? It is to let you know that we had a massive heart attack, okay, a global economic heart attack. And it takes years to recover from that. And so that doesn't make our jobs easier. And you know what? Nobody wants to hear about it when they're on the streets and they're just trying to put food on the table and pay for their rent and get to where they need to go or get to their jobs. But it's important for us to understand the context. And I just want to remind everyone, our government has not stood still. We have at every moment tried to find ways and provide targeted support to Canadians. We have introduced the grocery rebate. We have increased the Canada Child benefit. So on the 7th anniversary, which is what happened this year, we increased it by 6.3%. We have done a number of things for students. You know, I'm thinking about all the students that are going back to school now. You know, there is, you know, now we have now forgiven forever any of the interest on any Canada student loans starting from August 1st moving forward. We've increased grants to up to $4,000. And we have increased the amount of loans that students can actually take. You know, we've introduced the dental benefit, and we're about to introduce the National Dental Care Plan. We've introduced national child care. we've increased the Canada Worker Benefit. There are so many measures that we've put into place. And I'm going to mention one more thing because it's been mentioned a number of times. I mean, I'm looking for ideas. I'm looking for ideas if there's more that we need to be doing without negatively impacting, the economy from an inflationary perspective. I'm open to those ideas. And one of the things I've been hearing at this meeting has been about what you call the carbon tax or the price on pollution. And I'm going to say to all of us, that is a dangerous road to go down. I think that if we have not noticed that Canada has the impact of all of the forest fires that have impacted Canadians, we have had I think it's burning. I just wrote this down. We're on track. This wildfire season is on track to destroy 4 times more land than in any previous year. And the disaster assistance to the federal government has been at a cost of $2.9 billion this year alone. We need to move faster to move to a low carbon future. We need to move faster to a low carbon economy. And I know that there was an announcement that was made by Minister Wilkinson the other day around a clean electricity grid. If you listen to all the experts, if we move forward with that as expeditiously as what we are proposing, all the clean energy experts are actually saying the costs will actually go down for Canadians in terms of electricity costs. So we want to move faster in terms of tackling climate change, in terms of moving to reducing our emissions. That is the responsible thing to do for our kids and our grandkids and for our future and for our world. And it's also the responsible thing to do if we actually want to be reducing our energy costs both now and moving forward into the future. All righty, Mr. Chair, it's a pleasure. Thank you for letting me speak for a few moments. And I'll pass the baton to someone else. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zarowitz. Next, I have Mr. Lawrence on the speaking list.
Thanks very much. It goes very much to the role of Parliament. The fact that the Minister of Finance will not appear. The role of Parliament since the time of the Magna Carta has been to hold the government responsible. And those in opposition parties have a sacrosanct responsibility. And even when those attempts are ignored, just brazenly schlepped off as if the people, the voice of the people, are not important, doesn't mean that Parliament should go away. And in fact, it's just the opposite. Parliament should double our efforts when the government is being non-transparent and refusing to be held accountable. And in fact, you know what, if we looked at NDP leaders of the past like Tommy Douglas and Jack Layton, I would say that they would never allow the government to simply be unaccountable, just give up and go home. And in fact, I might even say to the member of the NDP, why not make it a part of the supply and confidence agreement that the Minister of Finance actually respond to committee invitations? The NDP has made a large deal in the press as saying committees will operate independently, irrespective of the supply and confidence agreement. So why not prove that that's the truth? Act independently. Do all of our duties. The Bloc Québécois, the Conservative Party, we're doing our duty. We are attempting to hold the government of power in power to account. We are trying to speak truth to power. And in fact, we are speaking truth to power. We have had a very nonpartisan, very vanilla motion. Really, 90 minutes of the Minister of Finance's time to come, and a time when we just heard the Liberal member saying we're in extremely difficult, perilous economic times. The Canadians are struggling. We're asking for the Minister of Finance to come, I might say in the background of a recent cabinet shuffle. And on that note, I don't believe we even have a parliamentary secretary for finance as of yet. And so not only do we have a Minister of Finance who's unwilling to speak to us. We don't even have a parliamentary secretary yet. And by the way, my congratulations to Mr. Beach in joining cabinet. But I would expect that the party of Jack Layton, the party of Tommy Douglas, would, although having disagreements on many ideological grounds, would stand with the Conservatives and, in this case, the Bloc Québécois as well, in holding the government account, asking the Minister of Finance, not simply throwing up our hands and saying, well, it didn't work before. Well, let's not give up. Let's hold the Minister of Finance accountable. Let's hold the Deputy Prime Minister to account. Unless other colleagues have other comments that they'd like to make, I would like to see this go to a vote so we can see which parties believe in accountability and, quite frankly, which parties want this committee to be functional by putting forward a very reasonable motion and willing even to amend it and water it down for the benefit of the committee, and which parties don't believe in accountability.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. I have Mr. Blakey next.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad I get a moment to say a few things after that. It seems to me that Mr. Lawrence and I perhaps have a different view of what's involved in holding a government to account, because I've sat around this table for quite some time now, and as he well knows, I've voted many times with the Conservatives and the Bloc on a number of things, including ministerial invitations. I've helped them to amend government legislation in a number of areas where I don't agree with the government. So I do act independently on this committee. I've never done anything but that. And today is no different. What I'm suggesting to Mr. Lawrence is that his so-called strategy to hold the government account actually hasn't been very effective, because what is happening by continuing to do the same old thing that isn't working is that the government gets to derail the good work of the Finance Committee by simply having a minister refuse to appear. And so what that means is that because we spend all our time talking about whether she's going to appear, when I think at this point we know full well that's not her preference, and we also know full well that we don't have a way of compelling her to appear. I'm not talking about giving up. What I'm talking about is doing other things that might actually compel her to come here, not because we can coerce her, as we know we can't do that, but because this committee could actually do some work for a change to generate some interesting policy ideas that the minister feels required to respond to, instead of just navel gazing all the time and whining about the fact that she's not going to show up. I do think that's reprehensible. I think that ministers do owe it to parliamentary committees to show up. I have said as much. There are extant invitations that she continues to ignore. So this isn't about whether or not people are willing to hold the government to account. This isn't about whether or not people believe in the role of Parliament or not. As the member will know, I believe very strongly in the role of Parliament. This is about whether the opposition strategy on committee to get the minister here and to hold the government to account has so far been successful. And I put to the committee that it hasn't. Do you want the evidence of that? When have we successfully got the minister to appear outside of her own legislation? What we have today is another attempt to do the same thing that hasn't worked. So what I'm saying is that it'd be nice to try something different. It'd be nice to try to have the committee actually focus on a study. I mean, what studies outside of legislation has this committee reported back to the House on in 2 years? None come to mind. And it may be that there was one and I missed it, but or it's just not occurring to me at the moment, but there hasn't been very many. We've got an open study on inflation. We've got an open study on fiscal federalism. We've got an open study on green finance. It's not for lack of studies, it's for lack of time, because we spend most of our time talking about whether or not the minister is going to come, and then what the wording of a particular invitation that I think all of us on the opposition side anyway are pretty sure she's going to ignore anyway. So when we call extraordinary meetings, it would be nice to do it in order to get some work done and in order to highlight issues for Canadians that might cause the government to feel that they need to respond to those things. Now, look, again, I absolutely think that the minister should be coming. It's why I've supported invitations in the past. Those previous invitations for the minister to appear didn't pass on the steam of the Liberal bench. They passed because I supported them. And I'm still waiting for an answer on some of those things. And I think we have more work to do of a different kind in order to get the minister into a place where she feels that she had better respond. I would prefer that she had a more deeply ingrained respect for Parliament. I think that's important. But I don't see any evidence that that's the case. And so I think we should spend our time talking about those issues that matter to Canadians and consulting with experts in order to get those things done. I think that's very much in the tradition of the NDP on Parliament Hill. And I would say, I think if we want to talk about the politics of it, I think it's convenient for the official opposition to be able to talk about the fact that the minister won't come instead of talking about what they share in common with the Liberals, which was that Pierre Poilievre initially said when the mandate for the Bank of Canada was up for review that it should remain narrowly focused on inflation targeting, which is why interest rates continue to go up and up and up. New Democrats were talking about building into the mandate of the Bank of Canada a concern for full employment. We've heard from the governor of Bank of Canada at this very committee, because he does respond to our invitations, which is a good thing, that he's going to continue to raise the interest rate until unemployment goes up. That was the very thing that we were talking about when it was the appropriate time to talk about that, when we could have made a difference, actually building full employment into the mandate, not the preamble, which is what the Liberals did, but substantially into the mandate. Instead, they took Pierre Poilievre's advice. He had admitted as much. We were on a panel together in the fall of 2021 after the election, and I said so on that panel. He threatened legal action, said he'd have to talk to his lawyers about maybe getting a gag order because that hurt his feelings, because he knew it was true. And incidentally, I don't think that anyone who supports freedom of speech and expression should be talking that way as a response to a legitimate political criticism anyway. Also, when we talk about inflation, it's New Democrats that are the only ones talking about the role of corporate greed in driving inflation. And so I think it's kind of convenient for Conservatives to want to keep coming and talking about how the minister never shows up, as if somehow she's magically going to change her mind, instead of talking about the substance of the issue. So I'm still open to issuing some kind of invitation to the minister, but I'm done trying to fix everything at the table. I think we have an appropriate invitation for the minister. And in the meantime, instead of convening to continue to talk about how she continues to ignore our invitations, and maybe if we get the wording right on this one, it'll change her mind, we should start examining some of the issues that are really affecting Canadians and coming up with ideas and statements as a committee that she feels compelled to respond to. Because I'm tired of doing the same thing and getting the same results. And while I get that that's great for cheap political point scoring for the official opposition, I don't think it actually does much for Canadians. That's my point. And that's got nothing to do with not doing my job as a parliamentarian. It's got everything to do with honoring the role of Parliament. And it's beseeching us to do it better around here instead of just doing the same old thing that hasn't been working. To Ms. Zarowitz, just before I conclude, I know in her remarks, she alluded to agreeing with me on a number of things. I had said that I thought it'd be very helpful if the minister would show up in the context of our inflation study to help us wrap that up this fall. I just wondered if that was one of the things that I said she agreed with.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. I don't see anyone else on the speaking list, so I guess we'll go straight to the vote on the amendment first. So I'll... Sorry, I see Mr. Redekop.
Mr. Chair, just once we're done the vote, I have something I'd like to say.
Sure. Okay. So we'll start with the vote. Recorded division.
Mr. Chair, is this on the amendment or on the
amendment?
On the motion.
That's right.
Yep, for recorded division, I can do that.
That's the order.
For the vote on the amendment of Mr. Lawrence, Mr. Baker.
No.
Ms. Zarowitz.
No.
Mr. MacDonald.
No.
Mr. McDonald.
No.
Ms. Atwin.
No.
Mr. Chambers.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence,
Yes.
Mr. Redekop,
Yes.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie,
En faveur.
Mr. Blakey.
Yes, on the amendment.
So we have 5 yeas and 5 nays. So you would get a casting vote.
So I'll be the tiebreaker.
Point.
I'll vote in favor of the amendment.
Just a quick point of order, perhaps the clerk
Yes,
could clarify.
Point of order, Mr. Blakey.
I know that in the House, the rule for a speaker, if there's an amendment, is typically to extend debate. So I think typically for the speaker on the floor of the House, if there were an amendment, a speaker would vote against in order to break a tie. I'm just wondering if at committee, some of those same rules that inform the vote of the speaker would likewise inform the vote of a chair.
So thank you for your comments, Mr. Blakey. So the clerk has something up here for casting votes. That the chair is not bound to give reason for his or her vote and is free to vote either way.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Mr. Chambers, I see your hand is up.
Just a different point of information. I had accepted those amendments as friendly. I don't know if that changes kind of the procedure, kind of negating the trying to negate the requirement for another recorded division, but just off for that as but it sounds like since we already had that vote, I'm not sure we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Yeah, I think since we've already had the vote now on the amendment, now we will go to the vote on the main motion unless anyone else wants to debate it as amended. Okay, so
Pass on division?
So we'll have a recorded division. Clerk?
The vote on the amended, the motion as amended. Mr. Baker.
Opposed.
Miss Zarowitz.
Calling me Mr. No.
No. Mr. MacDonald.
Opposed.
Mr. McDonald.
Opposed.
Miss Adwin.
No.
Mr. Chambers.
In favor.
Mr. Lawrence.
In favor.
Mr. Redekop.
Support.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie.
En faveur.
Mr. Blakey.
No.
So that is 6 nays, 4 yeas.
So the motion as amended has been defeated. And Mr. Redekop, you had your hand up? Or you said you had something to add after?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes. Just wanted to, as I said, I'm new to this committee, but you may not know I was a former home builder and built houses in the Saskatoon area, built about 60 houses over a space of about 10 years. And I saw the struggles from both sides of the fence, really, from the way the buyers had to deal with all the issues that they faced coming up with down payments and dealing with banks and the increased costs that were affected that directly affected them. And of course, on the flip side, as a home builder, I saw the other side of the story, which was all the increasing costs and the pressures that contractors and builders faced in order to try to keep up with the changes in the government building codes and all the pressures that came on there. Saskatoon right now has a vacancy rate of 3.4%. it's very low. And because of that, rents are increasing. We have a lot of students coming to our city. We have a lot of newcomers and just people moving into Saskatoon, and that's causing more and more people to look for housing, and especially at the lower levels of rent, those prices are going up significantly. There are also a lot of changes that happen in building codes, which make it more and more difficult for builders, such as I was, to stay, there's new rules to follow, new things you need to do, and that of course adds costs, which puts upward pressure on prices. And we talk a lot about gatekeepers, and building codes can be one of those things, but also cities are there when it comes to getting building permits and the places that they allow you to build, and the restrictions and the different ways that they can really make life difficult for builders. And of course, we have that in Saskatoon, and I know we have that right across the country. Conservatives have talked a lot about ideas on this, and one of the big ones is to work with cities to encourage them to actually build houses quicker, to reduce some of the red tape and rules and restrictions that are causing it to be very difficult for builders to build, which make houses more expensive. The other idea that we've talked about is using federal money as a carrot to cities, essentially, to help them to encourage them to build more housing, to build housing near transit infrastructure and those types of things, and use the money that we have in the federal government to encourage cities to do that sort of thing. And of course, the idea of selling excess federal buildings, and converting that into housing is another one of the ideas that we have. So we have a lot of ideas that we've talked about on our side of the fence. We also need to build 3.5 million more houses in Canada. That equates, to put it into context, it equates to about 130% more houses than we build today. So if a home builder like myself was building, let's say, 10 houses a year, that means I would have to build 23 instead of 10. If you're building 100, that'd be 230. Those are very significant and difficult numbers to achieve, because of even just simply finding the tradespeople to do those kinds of jobs. And the reality is that we're using the same technology more or less to build as we were 40 years ago. And so there's lots of things that have to be done, lots of things that need to change. And so I noticed that we have a new minister of housing, infrastructure, and communities. And actually, he was the previous immigration minister. I sit on the immigration committee, and so did a lot of work with that minister. And he did actually show up to committee when we asked him to. And so for that reason, I think it would be very, very helpful for this committee to actually hear from him, to talk about some of the ideas, because this is one of the biggest pieces of inflation, biggest pieces of cost that the average Canadian faces. And so, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion, and I'll read it now, that the Standing Committee on Finance call the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities, Sean Fraser, to appear before the committee for 90 minutes, and that the minister appear at committee at the earliest opportunity and no later than 14 days from the adoption of this motion. So I don't know if we need to take a minute for the clerk to send that around. I think we have that sent to the clerk. But yes.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Is this motion not out of order?
So first, thank you, Mr. Redekop. Ms. Zerwitz, I'll recognize your point of order. I'll just get some clarification from the clerk, if I can just have a minute.
Mr. Chair, before you rule, I may just wish to add, once you've got some advice from the clerk, to this point of order.
Well, I actually have a second part to it, depending on what he says.
Okay, so before I make a ruling, I'll turn the floor to Mr. Blakey and then Ms. Zerowitz. Just because
thank you.
Mr. Blakey did have basically his hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly appreciate that. And I guess just wanted to add my own understanding is that when a 1064 meeting is called, that the purpose for the meeting is defined in the letter that calls the meeting. It's not just a kind of general meeting, but that the meeting is specifically for the business mentioned in the letter. And so that is my understanding, and I do await your ruling on that. But I thought that was the established practice.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Ms. Zerowitz?
I move to adjourn.
Since we're going on it's a point of
So, Ms. Zerowitz, since there is a point of order on the floor right now, we'll have to deal with that before we move on to any other business. So if colleagues, you guys are okay with it, I'll just need a minute before I make a ruling after discussing with the clerk. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, colleagues. As you know, this is my first time being a chair in public, and I'm, I guess, fulfilling my responsibility as the vice chair of the Finance Committee. And I just want to thank the clerks for all their help along the way today for making this as smooth as it's been going. So in discussions with the clerk, I did make the decision after consulting with the clerks that that the motion is relevant, given the fact that within the 106.4 rules that there is a section that says other business can be discussed, or other matters can be discussed in the particular meeting. And given the discussions that that took place on the floor today, made the motion relevant. And so I will rule that it is in order. So I will, it is now a motion that is up for debate on the floor. And so I see, I'll recognize Mr. Blakey first, because I thought he had his hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I believe Ms. Zerowitz had her hand up
okay,
first.
My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Blakey.
Okay.
Ms. Zerowitz. Sorry about that.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just to let you know, that's the third time I've had mine, and that's okay. I don't mind, but you're not noticing when my hand is up, and it's the third time that I've had it before someone else, and someone else has come before me. But anyways, look, what Mr. Redikoff has put forward, look, there's nobody that's in our country that's not going to agree that we do not have a housing crisis, and it is critical. I will say to you, though, and I wouldn't mind maybe if the clerks might have this available. I thought the current inflation study that we actually have underway actually indicates like housing as a main focus that is before us. And so I don't know if that's inconsistent with what Mr. Redikoff is actually proposing, is proposing a particular minister to come. And what I would probably say is that the minister should come as part of that study that we already have underway, as if my recollection is good, is that, we did start that inflation study with a very specific emphasis on housing, because that is where we were seeing the greatest impact in terms of inflation. Anyways, that's my only comment at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zerowitz. Mr. Blakey? You're on mute, Mr. Blakey.
There you go. Classic Zoom error. You can tell I'm out of practice, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say thank you for your ruling. While you were consulting the clerk, I had the opportunity to do a little bit of my own research, and I believe I found the section you're referencing on page 1096 of House Procedure and Practice. So it's always nice when we can learn a little something about parliamentary procedure at a meeting. What's unclear to me in the wording is whether members are free to present anything subsequent, or if the committee has to make a decision that it's interested in considering other matters at the meeting. I think it says, while it's considering the matter, that is the matter in the letter, the usual rules of debate apply. As such, there's no obligation on the committee to conclude debate. If it decides to consider the matter, it may do so as and when it wishes. In addition, the committee may consider other matters at that particular meeting as it sees fit. So is the process for that just to have members propose motions, or does the committee have to make a decision that it's open to considering other matters in the context of the particular meeting? Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Point of order, Mr. Lawrence.
I believe you already made your ruling. I believe that it's out of order.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. So once
again,
I'm
sorry, Mr. Chair. Can a question be out of order?
Mr. Blakey and Mr. Lawrence, what I'll do is, once again, because this is my first time doing this in public, I'll revert back to the clerks to help me out on this decision. If you can just give me a moment. So thank you, everyone, for your patience today. After discussing with the clerks, I'll answer both Mr. Blakey and Mr. Lawrence in both of their questions. Mr. Blakey, from what the clerks confirmed with me, that it is basically my decision had been made already on my ruling, and for the part that the discussions were relevant based on what the letter had inside of it, especially all the discussions that took place on the floor today. That is what led me to my decision today. And in the same vein, that's what I believe what Mr. Lawrence said was true, that my ruling had already been made. So that's why now we're going to open the floor to discussion on the motion that's on the floor now. And I do have, I had next on the speaking list, Mr. Baker. You still want to speak? Yeah, so Mr. Baker.
Thanks very much. So I think on Mr. Redekop's motion, I think there's a few points I'd like to make. I mean, first of all, I think that, we started this meeting dealing with a motion that a number of members of the committee felt was not reasonable and not a constructive way to move forward. And I think, again, in the spirit of being constructive and moving forward on really important issues, like housing, for example, and inflation, when I see, if we take a step back here for a moment, I think Ms. Zerowitz made the point, and I'd like to make it as well, is that this committee has spent a significant amount of time studying housing affordability, and within our inflation study, we have the capacity to do that. And as Mr. Blakey pointed out earlier, that inflation study is not complete. So, we have the ability to evaluate those matters. We've had the ability to do that, and we've done so, and we have the ability to do that under the inflation study, if that's something the committee would want to do. But the other point I would make is that this particular topic, my understanding is that there's already another committee that's already looking into this and already invited the minister to appear. The committee I'm thinking of is the Committee on Human Resources, Skills, and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. So I'm open to be corrected on that if I've been misinformed, but I think my point is that having two committees study something very similar and ask the minister to speak to the same issues, to answer a lot of the same questions to me would not be the best use of our resources as a committee, because that, in doing so, we would be taking time away from other things that we could be studying. Mr. Blakey spoke to the fact that earlier today in our discussion, in our meeting about, that how we could be productive in our committee and what else we could be looking at and spending time studying, and I agreed with that point, and I think that so occupying the committee's time on something that another committee is already doing, I don't think would be a productive use of time.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Next, I have Mr. Redekop.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to raise a couple of other things. To think that this is an important issue that should be studied by the Finance Committee is, I think short-sighted. 2/3 of household spending is on related to housing, and so as the committee talks about inflation and the impacts on Canadians, there's nothing more significant than the impact of housing on Canadians' budgets, and the government has pretty much admitted as such that housing is a huge problem in Canada and that it needs a lot of attention, and I think that's why there was a shuffle that happened. There's a new minister with presumably some new marching orders. And I think the interesting thing here as far as this committee goes, and why I think it's very important to bring the minister here, is, we talked about the dysfunction that's on this committee. Here's another opportunity to start the fall session with something productive. I suspect that as we have a new minister and they're working out a few things, there may be maybe the plan isn't fully crystallized yet, and this would be a great opportunity to get the minister in front of the committee to hear the ideas, to maybe provide some feedback to the minister to as far as strategy and ideas, so that as he goes away to figure out how best to tackle this problem, the committee will have had a chance to provide some input into that and have some thoughts. So just a couple other things why I think this is actually very relevant and very timely for this particular committee to interview and speak with the new minister on this issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Redekop. Mr. Blakey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you to Mr. Redekop for the motion. As he rightly highlights, this is an important issue. It's one I had mentioned earlier that I think would be a good idea for this committee to study, not just in one meeting with the minister, but actually a little more systematically. I take Mr. Baker's point that there is another committee that has already looked at this, but I do think that the Finance Committee may have a point of view that is a little different than the other committee that had examined this. I think we should be particularly focused on the question of how investor activity is heating up the real estate market. Often the conversation in Parliament has been around whether government spending in general has been fueling inflation that's contributing in some way to what's going on in the housing market. But I think even you can glean from Mr. Redekop comments and others around the table today that it's not just a function of government spending. In fact, in my view, government's not spending enough on housing. There are some other things that it may be doing that may have contributed to increasing prices. But there's no question that investor activity, independent of whatever government is doing in the private sector, is also heating up the real estate market. That's true at the corporate level with large corporate landlords that are cannibalizing affordable housing in order to turn it into condos or higher rent luxury units. It's also true at the level of smaller investors who are acquiring 4, 6, 8 different properties and renting them on Airbnb. And that's creating more demand as you have people that aren't just looking to buy houses as homes, but are looking to buy houses as investment properties with no intention that they be lived in for significant portions of the year, just enough occupancy to be able to make a reasonable return on investment from a financial point of view with short-term rentals. And those are just some examples of some of things that are happening in the housing space outside of things that are directly under the government's control that I think we need to take a bigger look at. And when New Democrats are talking about the role of various kinds of financial greed in the economy and the nefarious impact that that's having on the budgets of Canadian households, those are some of the things that we have in mind that we think we need to look at and ask some good questions about what kind of society we want to be, and wrapped up in that is whether we want to treat housing strictly as a commodity and a kind of investment tool, or whether we want to see housing as a social good and a human right. And so, there are some big discussions there, and I think they're worth getting into. Obviously, we're having a bit of discussion now. And I'm not going to take up all the rest of the time until 2:00 because I know there are others who want to say some things. And I am in favor of keeping to our originally scheduled adjournment time of 2:00. We've dealt with the business that this meeting substantially was called to deal with. But I'll just, in parting, say a couple months ago, or a few months ago, I think we got a lesson from Mr. Genuis and how challenging sometimes subs can make the life of a committee. Of course, in June, we had a meeting to discuss prospective schedule for the fall and what that might look like as a committee, including pre-budget consultations, the existing open studies that we have. I do think this is something we could make time for in the fall. I would rather do it as part of the kind of study that I've suggested and that Mr. Chambers suggested earlier on financialization of housing. I think if we issue a standalone invitation to the Minister for Housing, and then a few weeks after we come back, we're issuing another invitation to appear as part of our study, I don't think we're going to get both invitations, and I'd much rather have them appear in the context of an organized study of the issue than as a one-off. So, this wasn't something I was aware was going to be brought to this meeting. It's not something that I'm in a mood to make a quick decision about. I think we absolutely should be seized with this issue as a committee, but we should try and do it in an organized and structured way that's going to bear the most fruit and allow us to make the most of a ministerial appearance. I'm hopeful that Mr. Fraser will be more inclined to respond appropriately to the invitations of parliamentary committees than the other minister we've spent our time discussing today. So with that, I'll close. I see we still have some time before our scheduled adjournment time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Next on the list, I have Mr. Baker.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, you're doing a fine job today in your first day in the chair. I did want to make a few brief points. I'm conscious that others have their hands up as well in the time available. This is obviously an incredibly important issue to all of our constituents, and I too am in favor of studying it more. I think what's important to do, though, is be conscious of the work that this committee has already done in this matter. Within the inflation study, certainly the permanent members of the committee will recall that we had a component that was focused on housing, and we had some really thoughtful folks come in here and give us advice on the kinds of things that need to be done to address the challenges people are having in terms of the affordability of housing. And that inflation study isn't complete yet, and so if we're serious about those insights, then I think we should also find a way to wrap that study up so that we can offer that to the minister as advice. But going back to a separate study, the idea of a separate study, because we've done work, because other committees are and have been doing studies on housing, I think we need to be conscious of that. That doesn't mean I want to be clear, that doesn't mean I don't want to study it further, because it is a priority for folks. But I do want it, in my view, it should be something that's done in a targeted and thoughtful way, so that what we're doing is we're studying that aspect of the problem that touches Canadians the most, where we can have the most impact, and where we're not studying things that have already been done, because that's not the best use of our time as a committee and not in the best interest of Canadians. So I think open to looking at how we could do more study of housing along the lines of what Daniel proposed today, for example. I think is an interesting way to scope the study in such a way that we're studying an aspect of this problem that really touches Canadians, but doesn't repeat what we've done in the past. But I do think that has to be thought through and discussed offline by members of the committee so that we can come up and structure a study that really has the best impact for people.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Next, I have Ms. Zerowitz.
Okay, I'll try to take only 2 minutes so that I could allow my colleague, Mrs. Saint-Marie, to have the final word. I'm going to pick up the baton from where my colleague, Mr. Baker, just left. Look, I know that the HUMA study right now, I think, is focused on financialization, and I think that maybe there is something for us to be able to continue on from that study. I'd suggest that we have some sort of an agenda meeting, for lack of sophisticated words of saying that, so that perhaps there could be a discussion about how we can fit it in based on some of the decisions we've already made around pre-budget consultation and wanting to start with that. But I think we do have an excellent study on inflation. I think housing was a core part of that. I think that needs to continue. By no means do I think that's actually over, but I do think that there's going to be many other people we may want to hear from outside of Minister Fraser that can contribute and that might be able to provide helpful recommendations to our government. So I think that the only other point I would say to you is that I've met with a lot of developers, a lot of nonprofits who are trying to do housing in my riding. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of issues at the provincial and city level as well. And so it'll be interesting to have some of those comments come out also. I'm at 2:58, Mr. Chair. I have lots more comments, but again, I want to honor my colleague, Mr. Saint-Marie, and pass the baton to him. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Zerowitz. And next up, we have Mr. Saint-Marie.
Oui, merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You've done a great job today. The goal of today's meeting was to hear from the minister so that she could come speak about her plan to do something about the increasing rates of insolvency. It's very concerning. and in my opinion would justify striking this committee during the summer. I believe that what Mr. Rudikop said is very relevant. Sean Fraser was the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Finance and is familiar with the topic. If he's invited, I'm sure he will appear. As several of my colleagues have pointed out, nonetheless, I think that can be done once the committee resumes its regular sittings in a few weeks. Today's meeting, its purpose was to react immediately to concerning statistics. I believe that Sean Fraser will be willing to appear. This is an extremely serious topic, and I think that it should be prioritized when we resume regular sittings in a few weeks, because today's meeting was to urgently respond, ask the minister to speak about the insolvencies.
Thank you, Mr. Saint-Marie. Next, I have Mr. Baker up on the list.
Thanks very much, Chair. J'aimerais juste dire quelques mots en français.
I'd just like to answer what Gabrielle just said. I think that maybe we should speak outside committee. Whether it will be this committee or not, I think we really need to figure out how we will proceed. We need to identify how we will study this topic as effectively as possible. Whether it be about what Daniel raised, whether it be by inviting the minister. But from my perspective, we have an interest in studying this topic. But what we are lacking is consensus on how many days we should allocate to studying it. And the exact aspects of what will be studied. So that's what I propose.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. I don't see any more discussion on the floor, so we can go to...
Move to adjourn?
There's a call to adjourn on the floor, so we'll go to the vote on that.
So it can be recorded division on the...
So we'll have a recorded division
Sure.
on call to adjourn the debate.
Oh, just a quick point of clarification. Is this a vote to adjourn debate on the motion, or is this a vote to adjourn the meeting?
According to Mr. Baker, this is a motion to adjourn the debate on the meeting.
No, the meeting.
On the meeting.
The meeting.
To adjourn the meeting.
So, Mr. Baker,
In favor?
Ms. Zarowitz,
En faveur.
Mr. MacDonald,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
In favor?
Miss Adwin,
Yes.
Mr. Chambers,
Against?
Mr. Lawrence,
Against.
Mr. Redicop,
No.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie,
Oui.
Mr. Blakey.
Yes.
So that is 7 yeas, 3 nays.
Okay, everyone. So meeting has been adjourned. Thank you for your patience and time today.
Thank you. Bye.